Inslee calls that feckless because he has no freaking idea what it's like to do what's in the best interests of the people he serves. He's never done it. This segment is brought to you by Eastside Weight Loss Clinic. Sick of fad diets that work for a couple months and then you gain all the weight back? Well, I'm down 37 pounds on the Eastside Weight Loss Clinic program, and I've kept that weight off for more than a year. Schedule your free 15-minute consultation today at eastsideweightlossclinic.com. There was a fight going on in the city of Kenmore. Essentially, there had been an approval for a development project that a lot of people had been led to believe would be about housing low-income veterans and the elderly, and it was fairly non-controversial. But then it became clear, a little too late for some, that this was a housing project that would house people who are recovering from drug abuse, who are exiting homelessness, and that brings about very different challenges than if you're housing low-income veterans or low-income seniors. So Jonathan Cho covered this story. Eventually, citizens in Kenmore pushed back so forcefully that the city decided to cancel this Plymouth housing project. But here's a little bit of Jonathan's coverage. And, what he really found out is that at the core of the frustration with citizens in Kenmore was that they were left in the dark until they felt it was too late.
Paul Lee believes it's all by design.
So it seems that they're actually counting on a community that doesn't really care.
He's one of the administrators operating Kenmore Neighbors, one of the most influential community Facebook groups that took on Plymouth housing last year and convinced the city council to block them from moving into their downtown core.
The CEO seemed like she basically was first to talk and first to leave and didn't care what the community had to say.
Housing First is a very, very effective way to keep people stably housed.
Angry residents claim Plymouth did a bait and switch.
Sometimes we have to say no. We don't want it.
Selling it initially as affordable housing for veterans and senior citizens.
Look at the people here. Look at how upset we are. Why do we have to go through this?
But then last minute, changed it to apartments for the chronically homeless and drug-addicted individuals.
So after they did that, and after citizens showed up angry to the city council, Kenmore listened to those citizens and said, you know what, you're right, we're not doing it. We're not doing it. It was a bait and switch, and we're not going to allow this Plymouth housing project to move forward. But that was not the end of it. The Democrats who were upset by that went to their friends in Olympia, and their friends in Olympia put forth a bill to try to make sure something like that never happens again, and trying to give the state the power to essentially force local jurisdictions to accept these transitional or supportive housing projects, whether their citizens want them or not. The bill is House Bill 2474. It is still alive in Olympia. It is still very much being debated in Olympia. And it would, encourage cities to go down the path of allowing these types of housing units in their neighborhoods and in their downtown cores. And if they don't agree to do it, it essentially would punish them or try to force them to have these sorts of things in their communities. And we'll have a debate coming up about whether that's appropriate or not. Here's a little bit of testimony in favor of this bill.
This bill would help ensure that our cities are complying with the state statutes and intent to create housing that reduces homelessness.
Sadly, we are seeing unprecedented opposition to new low-income and supportive housing projects more frequently and with more intensity.
Although I support local control is being abused by bad actors in this case.
A fully funded, shovel-ready project that we had been working on for nearly 2 years was hijacked by misinformation and fear-mongering.
Yeah, so we support local control unless you don't agree with us. Then we don't want you to have local control. Then we want to take local control. We think that you're spreading misinformation and you're bad actors if you don't want this housing unit and we want it. That's about how this conversation has gone. So here's the real kicker. And again, what Governor Inslee said about this. So he came out at a press conference, and again, credit to our friend Jonathan Cho for putting this out there. And he had a message and he's supporting this bill. He had a message to city leaders in Kenmore who shot this project down.
There is a bill that I think is an important one. It's Bill 2474. This bill would really encourage local leaders to step up to the plate and show some leadership to site housing. This has been a problem. Most recently in Kenmore, we had a site for over 100 housing units ready, set to go, been well worked, financing in place, consistent with local zoning, but local leaders showed more fecklessness than leadership and killed the project.
Fecklessness. Governor Jay Inslee dares to call someone else feckless? You know, and I had to look up the definition of feckless because I know what it means, but I thought, is that really the word he even meant to use? Because it was that offensive. Feckless, lacking initiative or strength of character, irresponsible, useless, worthless, incompetent, inefficient, inept. Feckless. I have never encountered a politician more feckless than the governor. Feckless, by definition, is a governor who pretends not to know that 6 square blocks of the state's largest city has been taken over by left-wing rioters. Feckless is a governor who says absolutely nothing while the campus of his alma mater is taken over by anti-Semites, or while anti-Semites block a freeway for over 5 hours and the governor says nothing. That's feckless. Feckless is not locally elected individuals who listen to their citizens, take those concerns to heart, and do what they believe is best for the people who they are elected to serve. Insley calls that feckless because he has no freaking idea what it's like to do what's in the best interests of the people he serves. He's never done it. 12 years in office, he's never done it. I want to play something for you that had me, I was in here before the show, listening to it, applauding it, and it's one of the best clips I've ever seen. I'm hard on politicians, but when there's a politician who nails it, I got to give him all the credit in the world. I want you to listen to how the deputy mayor of Kenmore responded to the attacks that they have now endured from Democrats in Olympia, from King County Executive Dow Constantine, and from the governor of the state of Washington who thinks they're feckless.
There's a purpose to having public hearings and public input. We had substantial public input regarding the Plymouth project, things that did not come to light without our public. And we had to make a fair, unbiased decision about what was right for the future of our city. And we made one. Listening to our community and being shamed by our county executive and our governor and members of the Democratic Party throughout our region is really galling. We are a democracy. I believe in our community, and we as a council have your back on all sides. Those of you that supported Plymouth, I hear you. But this was a nuanced, incredibly important decision. We cannot shame each other. We must come together. We must listen to each other and bring forward the best decisions and be leaders. Standing back and being shamed for listening to our voters, I'm not going to stand for it. We have a caring, compassionate community that got engaged. When we say your voice matters, it does. It is our duty to listen. So I am thankful to our community. This council has your back, all of you on both sides. This isn't the end of our work for affordability and ending homelessness. This is only the beginning. When we have people coming together, we must keep them engaged so that we can work to create the Kenmore we will always call home.
Ladies and gentlemen, Kenmore Deputy Mayor Melanie O'Kane. I wish every single elected leader had that passion to do what's right for their constituents and to stand up for them and to stand up for themselves when someone like Governor Jay Inslee wants to dictate from the Mount what's best for their communities. Go to hell, honestly. I know this is a show called Undivided. What Governor Inslee does and what he says, calling these local elected leaders feckless, believing he knows better than everyone else, is one of the most divisive things happening in this state right now. That's what's divisive. What the city of Kenmore did, what you just heard from the deputy mayor, that's how we bring us back together. By understanding that just because people disagree with you doesn't make them feckless or incompetent, but that being willing to hear, as the city of Kenmore did, from all sides of the issue, making a decision they felt like was in the best interest of what's happening for their city and standing by that decision, even in the face of overwhelming pressure that is the opposite of feckless. And I applaud them for it. Now listen, this whole debate, for me, really has nothing to do with the central issue at hand. I believe that reasonable people can disagree on whether the state should be able to exert its power in forcing local jurisdictions to allow some of these housing projects to move forward. I think we can have a legitimate debate and dialogue and disagreement on that. But that's not what Governor Inslee wants to have. That's not what Dow Constantine wants to have. That's not what Democrats who are pushing this bill want to have. They don't want to have a conversation about it, about how to work better with communities to make sure that we get some of this housing that we desperately need in our state. They want to shove it down their throats, whether they want it or not, whether it's best for them or not. And they don't want to hear anything about the concerns about it from community members. They'll just accuse those community members, as you heard in the committee testimony, of spreading misinformation, of being bad actors. There is a need for this housing. We are in the midst of a drug crisis. We are in the midst of a homelessness crisis and a mental health crisis, all of it really related, as we're going to talk about coming up in our next segment. And we all want people to get better. We all want them to get back on their feet, and we want them to exit the system. That requires them, in a lot of instances, to get into some sort of supportive housing or transitional housing. And if you don't have that housing, well, there's nowhere for them to go. So it has to go somewhere. But the issue is that in a lot of these instances, you have entities trying to shove that housing onto a community while keeping community members in the dark. And it cannot work that way. It will never work that way. You know, we looked at what happened in the Chinatown International District when Dow Constantine wanted to expand this homelessness complex, and they didn't consult anyone in the Chinatown ID. And what happened? People got so mad, they protested it and pushed back until the county was forced to cancel it at the last minute. I think it was Linwood where you had something going in next door to a boys and girls club, maybe a methadone clinic or something. And it was a surprise to everyone. They felt like they were left in the dark on purpose. Of course they're going to be upset about it. And then in Kenmore, you had this bait and switch where it's like, hey, you want housing for low-income veterans and the elderly? Well, of course we do. Just kidding, it's going to be for drug addicts and for people who are getting out of homelessness. If the state really wants more communities to be accepting of these sorts of projects, the very best thing for them to do is to encourage transparency, is to encourage public participation and input in the process. But when you call local elected leaders feckless for trying to do just that, for trying to urge transparency, for giving citizens a voice, you are not being a good partner, and you are not going to encourage any jurisdiction to want to work with you on these projects. A lot of this is in the delivery, is in the ability of state lawmakers and the governor not to look down on everyone, but to work with them, to have them at the table, to do what's best for our state and for our communities. But you have elected leaders who don't care. They don't want to do that. That's the problem. So let's fix the way that we have these conversations. Let's include the people who are going to be most impacted by something like that being next door to them. Let's value their opinions. And I promise you, you'll have more communities jumping on board to work with you on this, because it is a net good for our state, and it is something that we need right now.